Welcome everybody. Thank you for, as always, taking the time out of your day to come and meet and gather with SEMC friends. Today the topic is virtual field trips. I know everything seems to be moving into virtual for the next 6 months, year, who knows how much. My name is Zinnia Willits. I'm still the Director of Collections and Operations at the Gibson Museum of Art, but as of last Friday, I'm also taking over for Susan Perry as Executive Director of SEMC. Just so everybody knows, I'm live with it now. My SEMC email is up. I'll put it in the chat if anybody needs to reach me that way. If you call the SEMC general number, it gets kicked directly to my phone. So in terms of that type of transition, it has been seamless. Obviously, it's going to be a lot going on this month for me as I move out of one position and into another, but I'm really excited to be here with all of you into the future. And SEMC is a really strong organization, and I feel like now more than ever, we all need each other and we need this professional touch point. And so we're going to continue to do these Zoom meetups as long as it seems like everybody is interested in them. What you've noticed about the SEMC Zooms is they're much more informal than a lot of the offerings. It's not a formal webinar. There's lots of resources out there where you can get those, but I feel like there's value in this type of presentation as well. So I'm going to be quiet now and turn it over to Michelle and a couple Michelles. Man, we got all M's today, all of our speakers, and thank them in advance for the great presentations they're going to give.
This one real quick, Michelle. Yeah, we do have a second Michelle today, and so, which is odd. I've been dealing with that all day. This is my third or fourth Michelle of the day. So just really quick,
no
Michelle
Schultz. I got a meeting that's starting here at 3.
Oh, Tina, put yourself on mute. Okay. Yeah, there you go. If I could ask everybody to go ahead and mute themselves. My name is Rochelle Schultz. I'm at Pensacola State College in Pensacola, Florida at the Anna Lamar Switzer Center for Visual Arts. And I'm actually the regional rep for the southeastern part of AAM EdCom. And like Zinnia said, we've been presenting these talks now on a weekly basis, and we are hoping to keep them going as long as possible, as long as there's interest from people that want to hear us speak or hear our speakers present on different topics, and as long as we don't run out of topics. And so if you look over in the chat area to the side, I am looking for speakers for upcoming talks. We are currently scheduled through May 19th, but I'd like to, again, continue this into the summer as long as we can. And then once the shutdown sort of, runs its course or slows down a little bit, perhaps move them to a monthly situation. But if you happen to know anybody or have some experience in some of those topics, for instance, online teacher continuing ed, restructuring ed departments after reopening, new methods for inclusion. This is a big topic right now that I'm looking into because of the switch to online content. We're sort of excluding a large population that doesn't have access to the internet, and because of economic reasons, for a number of different reasons. And so how do we make sure that we're looking at inclusion when we're doing our new programming menus? And so please email me. My email is also to the side. Or if you don't see a topic there and you have something that you'd really like to hear about, please email me with that. Also over to the side, you're going to see a link to a Google Doc. I have been compiling all the resources from all the webinars, starting from the first one we had, and I don't recall the date. And so you'll find the PowerPoints there. You'll find a link to the SEMC YouTube channel. You'll find links to articles, other webinars, sample documents. And so it's just chock full of things. Please visit it. You'll find information from today and information from the past. Plus also I've started compiling just resources at the bottom, like a resource index. And if you happen to have information that you think would fit well into this document that others might be interested in, for instance, I posted a recording of a webinar I attended on developing your membership during the shutdown. And I posted the link to it there. And so if there's other resources you come across, please share them with me, email them to me, and I'll try to add them on there. I'm very slow at it because I'm doing it part-time. So just be aware that it may take me a few days to get to it. And lastly, again, my email's to the side. Otherwise, we're going to start today. Like Zinnia said, we're going to talk about virtual field trips. This is a very hot topic right now. There are institutions that are clamoring to get virtual content online. And then there's institutions that had these types of programs already established. We're going to review both of these today and sort of see what we can do now and moving ahead in the future in creating this online content and possibly keeping this online content even after the shutdown stops, because it's really an important tool for us. And it's something that I think that we're going to shift more and more towards in the future, just naturally. So we have two speakers today. We have Mandy Gibson. Let me get sorry, I turned my screen off. Mandy Gibson is the Executive Director at the Historic Johnson Farm in Hendersonville, North Carolina. And we have Michelle Harrell, who is the Director of Education at the North Carolina Museum of Art in Raleigh, North Carolina. And so we are going to start with Mandy today. So I'll let her take it away.
Okay, well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to pull up my screen here. And if you guys, can you see that? Okay, awesome. So I am the Executive Director at Historic Johnson Farm. We're about 20 minutes south of Asheville, North Carolina, so in the mountains. And I am on the end of the spectrum Michelle was talking about, the clamoring to put things virtual. We had done nothing like this here prior to the shutdown. So we closed March 16th, I believe, when schools closed. And then for the first 2 weeks, I, like many of you, were probably just overwhelmed. So I didn't start doing these virtual field trips until April 6th was the first one. But a little bit briefly about my site. We are a nonprofit organization that is actually owned by Henderson County Public Schools. So we are a 15-acre, 10 historic building site that tells the story of the tourist industry in Henderson County in the early to mid 20th century. And the two Johnson brothers that lived here donated their land and the house to the public school system. And at one point, I think we were one of 3 historic sites in the nation owned by a public school system, but that was in the 90s, so it might have changed since then. But I am the only staff member here, so I rely very heavily on volunteers, which has been hard during this time because most of them have not been coming around, obviously, for important reasons. But I knew that I wanted to reach out to the children because we are owned by the school system. We have a good relationship with them. We typically do a number of field trips throughout the school year, usually about between 30 to 40, because again, I'm the only staff person, so I can't do them every day because I do rely on volunteers. So we typically do about 2 a week during the fall and the spring. So this is what field trips used to look like. We would usually have whole grade levels, mostly elementary, come to the farm. We would split them into groups, into classes, and they would do different rotations. And this is what our field trips have looked like for the past month. So I quickly started trying to figure out what platform would be best to do these field trips on. And right now I have done them through Zoom and through Google Meets. And primarily through Google Meets, because our county, that is what all the teachers are using to communicate with their students. They were actually told that they could not communicate through Zoom and use Zoom. So that's why we've been using Google Meets. Each student has a Google email address through the school. And I'm sure our county is like most other counties that some students don't have computers, some students don't have internet access during this time. So unfortunately, that is kind of the downside to virtual field trips. Some students are going to miss out. I've tried to give teachers resources that they can print to give to students. In our county, they started digital learning the first week that schools were closed. They gave the teachers 4 days, and then they said, okay, this Friday, you're going to start virtual learning. And I'm not sure how many students are actually utilizing it. We have a number of kids that live on top of mountains that internet doesn't reach. We have a number of students that don't have internet at home. So a good number of them are having to still pick up packets from schools and do the paperwork, but a fairly large portion are able to participate in this. So I reached out to the teachers and I said, hey, I'm offering 3 different programs. You can pick which one, and if you have a Google Meet link that you're already using, I'll jump in on that. If you don't, I'll create one, and the students just log in on their own, as you can see here. I've had anywhere from like 4 to 35 students at a time. It really depends on the class and the school, but the teachers kind of know best what time. A lot of the teachers in our area have a set time each day where they meet with their students, or any of the students that can pop in. So we've kind of been sticking to those times. Let's see, what else? So this is kind of my setup. I did not purchase any equipment. We have all of our platforms we use are free. So hopefully most of you could do this because it's completely just use what you have. I found a spot that looked kind of good with the background because I still can't figure out how to do a virtual background without a green screen. Now, I will also say I'm fortunate that I'm still able to come to the site since I'm isolated here, and I also have to take care of our farm animals, so I'm considered essential. But I know that many of you are stuck at home, so just you could find a spot in your house that looks good. And one thing I quickly learned was that I needed 2 screens, so you can see 2 laptops there, because when you're presenting, you can't really see the kids and you can't read the chat box. So I have them pulled up on one side and I can see the chat, and then I have my presentation on one. So I just have basically a PowerPoint that I show for each of the programs here. So here's the other view of that. And I do like turn the camera off and mute the one that just has the chat box, so I'm not on there twice. And then these are the 3 programs we offer, one on North Carolina symbols, one on analyzing historical photographs and artifacts, and one called Then and Now, which compares childhood in the year 1900 to childhood today. Now the bottom, so the Then and Now one I had already created as an outreach program that I did in schools. So I already had the PowerPoint all ready to go. I had the artifacts. I just had to change how I presented it a little bit. The middle one, analyzing historical photographs, that was one that students did come when they came to the farm. So I just had to put those photos into a presentation. The top one I did create new, just I don't know why, I just wanted to. So that primarily has been used by 4th grade. But basically, you don't need to create something brand new. Use what you already have. There's some way, I'm sure, that you can turn what you did at your site into a virtual program. It might look a little bit different. Like, for example, I hold up artifacts instead of them getting to actually see them, but I also have pictures that I show them and things like that. And then some tips I've learned. Again, I've only been doing this a few weeks, so I'm not an expert. The next presenter you'll hear has been doing it for much longer. But I did try to make these as interactive as possible. I didn't want to just be talking to the screen. So I do have the students mute at the beginning. Even kindergartners know how to mute by now. They figured it out. If not, they get their parent to help them. But that just eliminates the background noise. If they are old enough to utilize the chat box, that has been great. Students can ask questions through that. And then I also ask questions periodically and they type the answers. I found about 2nd grade is when they can really use the chat box. 1st grade, they can type, it takes a while, but for kindergarten and 1st grade, I've done different things like put your thumbs up, Raise your hand if you have something to say. Hold up a number if it's a game. I have a little game in one of these where they hold up a number to guess. But pretty much second grade and above can use the chat box. Then at the end, I usually say, okay, if you have a question, you can actually unmute yourself and ask your question. And I either ask them to type in the chat box that they have a question, so I call them by name, they unmute one at a time, and that gives them a chance to actually interact. Some other things I found: have your presentation ready to go. Like have it pulled up and start sharing the screen even before you start, because there were a couple of times where my internet was messed up and the kids were just waiting there for me to try to get my program pulled up, and I don't like for the kids to wait. Sometimes, depending on if they're really paying attention and using the chat box, I will stop and just ask if there are questions, again, to increase that interactive component. And then most of all, keep it short. The kids are usually here when they come to a field trip here, they're here for 3 or 4 hours. That's definitely not possible here on screen. So mine have been running 20 to 40 minutes, depending on the grade level. And that seems to be about the time limit that they can handle being on the screen. Yeah, and I think in the future, I'm definitely going to continue doing this, even when students can continue to come here or can come back. I think it'll be good for teachers that don't have the money to come on a field trip or can't afford the buses. And then it will be very different, because it will be everyone in one classroom. They won't all be on one screen. I think it'll be a little bit easier. The teacher will just need to kind of call on students and things like that. But I guess my main point was to say that you can do this without spending a lot of money, with the things you have, with the sources you already have, and teachers and students will love it. Even if it's rough the first few times, they're just excited for something different. Some teachers in our district have started doing virtual field trip Fridays. So every Friday they'll go to a site just for something different. So yeah, I think that is what I have, and I will stop sharing so that Michelle can go ahead. And I think all the questions are going to be at the end.
Okay. All right. So, hi, thank you, Mandy. And just to piggyback, she's got great insight on just kicking this off just in the past month. So I think that she's done a great job, and I don't have that many tips. I can agree on pretty much most of the tips that she said. So I'm going to share my screen and give you a quick overview. It seems like not too long ago, we were dispelling myths in distance education in Charleston. I presented with Al Wheat and Tom Falvey at the conference in Charleston, but a lot's changed in 6 months. So today I want to give you guys an overview of like where we've come from. Mandy's correct. We have been doing this now for about 5 years. So I want to share just a little bit about our history of how we've developed the program, how we changed and adapted since COVID-19, and then continuing to talk about tips, lessons, and what we're thinking about for the fall. So our program, we've been very fortunate to have distance learning. We're a state art museum. North Carolina Museum of Art is mandated to touch all 100 counties. And through distance learning, in particular, some of these virtual field trips, we've been able to hit counties that we would not normally be able to serve. We are located in Raleigh. We have 2 buildings that house both the permanent collection and temporary exhibitions, as well as a 164-acre park. Virtual field trips began about 5 years ago. We received an IMLS planning grant to address the needs of future learners. So we were fortunate to have a little bit of grant funding, and just the whole process for that 2-year planning grant was the design process. So we asked, imagined, planned, created, and revised a series of programs that basically is everything that our museum offers now. I was fortunate in that to be able to visit and have several museums model virtual field trips. That was really helpful. A lot of museums are very generous in being able to talk to you if you see that someone has something. They may model it or even share a videotaped version of what they provide. In particular, Philadelphia Museum of Art, Cleveland Museum of Art, and the Amon Carter Museum really impacted the way that we approach our programs, and we modeled ours after Nancy Strickland's program at the Amon Carter Museum, where she had a cart very similar to the one that you see on the screen here that she took in the galleries. So the cart can talk to, have one-to-one virtual field trips where it's one class and one facilitator, or we also have live sessions with guest experts. We've brought in our poet laureate and some visiting artists. We've had 2 very popular ones with artists where we've had multiple classes that all join at one time, sort of like this webinar kind of environment. And you can see on the screen here, sometimes if a school has one-to-one technology, the students may be watching the feed on a Chromebook or on a desktop computer where they're all watching and interacting in the chat as one voice. Or sometimes it's on a screen. I don't know if you can see the one in the middle where it's in the media center or on the projector in the teacher's classroom where we're all interacting. One of the things that we have learned, it was just to address some of your questions about advocacy and marketing. It took a long time for this program to develop. It was slow in the beginning as far as response. We were told that we needed a Polycom system because some of the big, Polycom is like a video conferencing, very, very expensive program that is something that I remember having whenever I was in college, like 20 years ago. It's the biggest waste of money that I feel like that we've spent is by investing in Polycom. I've had less than 5 virtual field trip requests of people that use Polycom system. Most everybody now uses a cloud-based system like Zoom or Google Meets, like Mandy was just explaining. Our attendance for these programs has doubled pretty much since the very beginning year. The current field trips that we've got scheduled will serve about 4,128 students by June 12th of this year. So, and in several counties, as I said, around the state, as well as counties outside of North Carolina. One of the biggest things that has impacted us this year is by adding a temporary exhibition where we had limited field trip allotments for. A lot of teachers could not get a field trip to come to the Frida Diego exhibition in the fall. And so they saw this as a coup to be able to do a virtual field trip. We also had about, I think it was 40% of the people that registered for those exhibition related virtual field trips were using it as a pre and post option. So either before they came to the exhibition or afterwards. So that has been a real success in being able to get the word out there and increase our awareness, is that this is something that they really saw as fitting a need. Another thing that we did in the past couple of years that helped with advocacy and marketing is we incorporated a little demo of this into all of our teacher professional development. So if I was at a conference, I would have Camille in the galleries and I would Zoom with her and have a quick demo of her using the cart to model a visual thinking strategy. So it was a great way for teachers to see what I'm doing at the conference site or the workshop where galleries. And there's been a lot of people, this is not my baby. Now we have, just to give some praise where praise is due, Emily Kotecki here on the right was the contractor when we first started developing these programs, and now we have Camille Toole is the manager of digital learning, and the contractor that's pictured here is Chelsea, and she's running some of our programs right now. Because when, just to address one more thing, another thing someone asked, I think Elise asked about CAN programs that teachers could be able to experience at any time. So one of the things that our virtual field trips are in the gallery. They are dialogue based. We felt that it was very important to have that kind of interactivity. But we did decide to go ahead and create another outreach format. We created a 360 video. And so that's what you can see here, is taking the most off-access place in our museum, which is our conservation lab, and creating videos with the conservators working on works of art that the student could be able to experience as a 360 video. And when I finish talking, I'll put the link to this 360 video in the chat window so that you can experience it. One of the things that we did, so that's an experience that can exist online that teachers can do at any time. The whole experience is 30 minutes. Our first 360 video was about 5 minutes long, which I like the length of that better, but this has like interactive quizzes and things that we were able to do. And again, most of this was produced in-house, not with, we did have some support from Mike Wallace at Lever Studios here in Raleigh, but this was not the massive budget that some museums might have for developing content. So this spring, what we wanted to do is we wanted to take this video experience and go out to the schools, where we brought virtual reality headsets where students could experience this 360 video and then have a 2,000-year-old Roman head that they could do a conservators report. And one of the biggest surprises we found from this is that that was their favorite part. They wanted to touch a 2,000-year-old head. Like, the technology was not the wow factor. If technology works well, it's invisible. They don't even notice it. They were engaged in the idea of scientific inquiry. So that was one of our biggest success stories in the past year. And if I could have a word for the year for 2020, it's definitely pivot. This is Ross from Friends. If y'all are as huge of a Friends fan as I was, it could become a drinking game in every webinar for museum educators that I've been in recently, pivot. So when we had to telecommute, we put all of our programs on hiatus for about the same time that Mandy was talking about earlier. It was the first week and maybe even the second week of April before we could adjust to our own families' remote learning needs and reconfigure what was an in-gallery experience to a PowerPoint. So what Chelsea did is she removed some of the programs because we don't normally work by PowerPoint. We usually use the object. So we had to create some content that supported what we normally would do in the galleries. And that took us just a little bit of time. So we reduced those programs. We use, as you see behind me and Chelsea here, Zoom background, so that way it gives the feel as if we're in the galleries, but it's basically a PowerPoint that we are running through. Another thing, so the format has changed a little bit. The menus have decreased, but the demand has very much increased. Within 24 hours of the announcement that our virtual field trips are back on, we got about a request for about 400 or 500 students within 2 weeks' time. So it's been a lot, but what it's allowed us to do is to also pilot new content in response to COVID-19 that we've been thinking about. And when teachers are requesting something that doesn't quite fit the menu of programs, I've had the luxury, Chelsea is putting out the virtual field trips, but I've had the luxury to create a new mindfulness program that explores social emotional learning by taking a coping strategy, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. It's a grounding strategy, and use that same strategy in looking at works of art. It's something that I've been passionate about incorporating in our program, and this gives me a chance to have lots of people that, so the virtual field trips I've done have been the ones to multiple programs. We have a community friend that connects homeschool. She has a virtual schoolhouse where she had about 30 families at one time that I did this virtual field trip with 2 weeks ago. And then last week I did it with the organization that we offer a lot of our virtual field trips with. They're called CILC. Again, and I can make sure that you've got the language for this so that if you were to add virtual field trips to your menu of programs, that might be worth considering, if nothing else for the support. We use them a lot as consulting, and I'm telling you, they respond within minutes. It seems like no matter what time I send them a quick email asking them about technology or something else. We also we get our Zoom subscription through CILC at a discount. So, to learn more about our virtual field trips, you can go and see that entire menu on our website, NCMA Learn. You can just Google NCMA Learn, and up here at the top, go to programs, and virtual field trips will be one of the very first choices that you have. I did want to ask Camille for some other tips to recommend, and one of the things that we feel, so our virtual field trips, we have put a date for June 12th is when they end. We know that there's school summer programs, year-long programs, but we need to give ourselves that kind of rest to reimagine this for the fall. We anticipate more virtual field trips this coming year than on-site visits, and we're planning accordingly for that as far as being in the galleries, where you have some priorities around how many school groups that you can have versus someone being in there with a cart. We're going to prioritize the cart to actually be in the galleries. Another thing that we wanted to share with you as far as a techie tip was making sure that when you set up the virtual field trip with somebody else, if they've not done a virtual field trip, and during this remote learning time, there's a lot of newbies. They may need to have a practice session. And in that practice session, we do an AV check, and we also get them to run an internet speed test. I would highly recommend that. I personally, here at home, I have 2 different wireless things that I split back and forth with, because all my family's also upstairs learning, my husband's work. So one of them was 40 megabytes, and the other one was 100 today, right before joining you guys. So sometimes that makes a huge difference on the internet speed test. Or if the teacher says, you know what, I have like 20, then it may not be enough for you to be able to have a good interactive virtual field trip. So those are just things to keep in mind. Let's see, and evaluation. As far as developing the process of a virtual field trip, I think the process for us has been a little messy, sometimes a messy pilot with teachers that we know or an individual request. The ones that I've developed just recently, these mindfulness programs, have been a quick conversation with the person to find out what their needs are, and matching it is something that I can offer. In the past, I favored the evergreen resources and our permanent collection, but as Camille saw this past fall, being able to offer something temporary that had a lot of interest to it and limited access, that was definitely worth doing. We also, as far as evaluation, have learned a lot. We've done evaluations with students. The form that we have is like a handout with a Likert scale with smiley faces, just so that they are having a good experience, that the communication is clear, and that they understand what the program was about, and having fun. Basically, those are the 3 biggest outcomes. We also have a survey monkey that we give the teachers after the virtual field trip. So that's just our virtual field trips at a glance at the North Carolina Museum of Art, and I am welcome to open it up for questions.
Yeah, Michelle, 2 that are specific to you. Somebody wanted to know how the kids touched the head for the conservators report.
So, and unfortunately, that we are pivoting on that program too, because schools are not going to allow us to come into their programs as much as they did in the past, and we have just decided there was so much cleaning involved before and after those the children put on the virtual reality headsets that it is going to have a hiatus until this is over with. But the question about the head, we did get some touchable objects donated from another museum about 1.5 years ago, and those are the ones that we've used with the gloves, the conservators' gloves. I mean, they literally have clipboards in the conservators' report, so that's how they get away with touching the head.
Go on.
I was going to hit some of the questions that I see, and then if Mandy wants to address some, go ahead, Michelle.
I have a whole list, so let me just run through them right here.
Okay, good.
Who is on the in-house team that's creating the 360 videos?
So we repurposed as much existing video footage as we could. So we have our AV Tech video producer / tech whiz of the museum was on that team, as well as 4 museum educators and Mike Wallace, that we did use an outside contractor to help us take existing footage and put it in this environment. So we did, Luke has a 360 camera. It's actually fairly inexpensive to buy these 360 like GoPro kinds of cameras that you can put in a space. So we did have to create some of the additional footage that you see where our conservator, Corey, is talking to the visitor and says, welcome, blah, blah, blah. So that was all new footage. Everything else was existing footage.
Okay, and I have a tip on that also, because a lot of time realtors will have those 360 cameras, and so you can also partner with a realtor if you have somebody that you know of or on your board or a member. You often don't even have to go and purchase those. You can borrow the tech or have them come in and take the pictures for you. I've had that done before, and then give them some sponsorship credits. That's a good tip on that one too. This is for both you and Mandy. So Mandy, if you want to unmute and get ready to answer questions. Somebody wanted to know if the teachers are required to have the virtual field trips, if you've set up like a program with the school boards to where these are embedded within their curriculums, or are these on demand, you know, where they can just pick from a menu and choose to come to you?
For us, they're totally on demand. It's not required at all. And I just emailed the teachers in our district. I have not really reached out to other counties yet. That might come in the fall, I think, especially if schools are operating differently than normal. So I just reached out to our teachers and said, hey, if you want to break, just sign up for a time. And since they don't really have to do, they just participate as well. So I've had a lot of teachers playing the interactive games and things as well. So it's just totally their choice.
Michelle, have you made any partnerships or anything with schools specifically, or classes?
More for the schools that we've piloted these programs with in the beginning. I think that's been very helpful, but it has been more, it's definitely been elective, just like Mandy was saying. They come to us. There's nothing mandated that says that they have to participate. We did have some programs that came from conversations with makerspaces. We did have a 3D printing middle school one that we've put on hiatus for right now, that we sent them the patterns for one of the works of art in our collection that they could 3D print, and then the students could hold the actual physical object while we're in front of it at the museum. So that was finding partnerships. We also do a lot of work, because we're a state museum, with the statewide agencies, and they have been very good at pushing things out to all STEAM teachers or all art teachers or whoever the audience is for that program.
I know that you had touched a little bit on the canned ones, but do you see yourself having any of the canned field trips where a teacher could just go to your website, or a homeschool mom could go to your website and just hit something that's pre-recorded? What might be the value in that, or might take away from the experience with offering something like that?
Yeah, so I've recorded a number of programs, both for students and adults, put them on our YouTube channel and linked them to our website. And I have had teachers say that that's helpful as well, because they don't have to gather everyone at one time. And I also was able to we had an intern from a local university at the beginning of the semester, and of course he had to stop coming, but I got him and another one of his classmates he couldn't go to his site either. They created virtual video guides to go with our recorded programs. And these are just kind of worksheets kids can fill out, answer questions as they watch the videos, and then they have some supplementary activities that the kids can choose to do. And I also end each of my programs with a challenge. So for like the childhood, the then and now one, I try to encourage them to find things around their house to make a historic toy, or to make a toy like they would have done in the past. And sometimes the kids will email me or share with their teacher what they did. So I try to get them thinking past the program as well.
And just to piggyback on that, we do too. We find that we don't want to record an existing virtual field trip. Our videos are much shorter because of the attention span, and anything that we do that we consider a virtual field trip, that's why we're really excited about XR and virtual reality and these 360 videos, is because it allows more of an immersive experience than what a regular video might do, where you can hear and ask them something and say, turn around and find the view where Ansel Adams would have photographed this, or where Georgia O'Keeffe would have painted today. So there's something that they are looking and thinking about. But yeah, I do think that the video content on our website has spiked in traffic. Teachers are definitely using those resources.
One question we get in a lot is, what about charging? Are these free? Are there plans to start charging as there's more demand? What do you do about a cost?
You go first,
Free.
Rochelle, this time.
Free. We made the mistake in the beginning of charging, thinking that we would, because we had a grant and we thought this grant's going to run out and we're not going to be able to support the need. No, it really needs to be free. And this is something that that could easily be scaled to fit the staff that you have, or scaled up with grant funding that you might receive. Mandy?
Ours are free. I didn't even, when I was rushing to put these together, I didn't even contemplate charging. I have worked at a site before that did charge, but they had the whole Polycom and all of that. Well, they actually they didn't charge for in-state, but out-of-state charged. And they got some, but not too much. So for this, I might have to in the future think about charging, especially if we stay closed for much longer. But we don't normally charge for, the kids in our county are free to come on a field trip. They just have to pay for buses. We do charge $3 a student for private schools and out of county. So if I were to expand it, I might look into doing that. But for now, it's free.
Michelle, is there a charge for students to take a field trip at your museum?
No, always free.
Like even just walking in? Okay, so in physical, so that's interesting. So we have some questions also about hardware and software, specifically about using Zoom as a platform, and then also what kinds of computers or microphones or systems might work best. If either of you could chime in on some tips for that.
Well, I think I'm on the very low key end of just using a laptop, and it seems to work well. The students are also using whatever they have at home. So they have laptops, they've been on phones and tablets. I've been run through, when there's like 30 kids on, they'll take their computer and run you through the house, and it makes you really dizzy. So far that it's worked. I've been able to hear them when they are talking. So just what I have.
Yeah.
And for right now, that's basically what we have. So we are using our own laptops at home. One of the things that we were able to do this past year on the teachers' ends, what teachers I feel like need that they don't always have in the classroom once school starts back, and maybe field trips are limited, but so you're still doing virtual field trips, is two things: a boundary mic and a webcam. So not all teachers have, like you might have a desktop computer at the teacher station where they don't have a laptop webcam here. Then also the boundary mic allows for dialogue, which is really important, at least in our approach. So that way, if it doesn't work out, and sometimes no matter how prepared you are and how you test things, the facilitator and the teacher know to it's repeat language. So the teacher in the classroom is the one that either calls on the students and then repeats their question and repeats their answer. And that's helped us. I'm happy to share some of the technology that we have on the card for those that are interested in really scaling that up. What that allows for us to do that was worth the money was being able to zoom in on the works of art closer than you can possibly get. I mean, like super minuscule. What we've been doing at home is we have Luke, our amazing video guy, has gone into the museum while it's been closed and gotten some video footage for me, because we didn't even have high enough resolution photos to get the detail that I really wanted to get on brushstroke and whatnot. So we've only done that once, but that's been super helpful.
And I know, Michelle, you talked a little bit about marketing, but how are you getting the word out and marketing these programs to teachers and homeschoolers and such?
So right now, during COVID, we only had to send one email to the teachers on our email newsletter, and we've hit our bandwidth of what we can handle.
Oh, wow.
We're doing 3 virtual field trips by Chelsea each day, and Camille and I are trying to support just a little bit as much as we can. Before that, like I said, teacher conferences, teacher workshops. We talked about it at every teacher program that we had, and I would also sometimes I go and do outreach through the state. Sometimes I will be on the school end helping to facilitate a virtual field trip, and then I give the boundary mic and the webcam to the school librarian, and then other teachers in that school can check it out from that one school. It doesn't belong to the teacher after that. So having those little hotspots has been helpful. So sorry, I heard someone's mic, so I had an echo. So I want to address one more technology thing that someone asked about Zoom. So I do pay for the paid subscription for Zoom. In the beginning, I don't think it's worth it for you guys if you're just prototyping this, but once you have some funding around it, having a paid subscription would be very much worth it. We switched all of our meetings now to webinar format, so the teacher can send this out to her Google Classroom and everybody join in under one link where we don't see their videos. It's not like what you're seeing the Brady Bunch gallery view right now or the presenter mode. We, for privacy settings, Zoom got a lot of bad publicity the first week or two of remote learning, because teachers would just put something out there on social media, not password protected, and hackers would come in and share porn in the middle of their virtual class. So, but still, after all that, I still recommend Zoom more than any other platform, because it's just so intuitive, so easy to use, and the features are worth it. So we do pay for, this year we actually paid just a little bit more for the Zoom webinar feature, and I'm now using that with some of our adult programs. We did a 2-hour live drawing class Friday night. That was a huge success, and within 2 hours we had 130 people that registered for the event. So I think it's worth for us to even increase the webinar capacity in our budget next year.
By any chance, did you do it for free? Are you charging for any of your online programs, even outside of field trips, out of curiosity?
Not yet, but like every one of you out there, we are trying to figure out the best way to do that. And I think that there could be some exclusive opportunities and exclusive conversations. Like one of the things that we tried Friday night with that live drawing program is we had a limited capacity for people that were in the room drawing with the artists. And that meant that after a few minutes, they could be asked to share their drawing, whereas everybody else could go to the overflow space where we live streamed on YouTube. So Zoom also allows you in the webinar feature to do a live stream. So we're calling that our overflow space right now.
Mandy, do you have any other tips for marketing?
No, like Michelle said, I first emailed the teachers that were supposed to come, that were scheduled to come on field trips this spring, just to kind of give them first dibs on scheduling. But then I just emailed the teachers on our list, well, all the teachers in the county, basically elementary and middle school, and it quickly filled up. I put some stuff on social media as well. So free marketing. And to answer Katie's question that just came up.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you can do Zoom through Google Meets. Google Meets is its own platform. So it's very similar to Zoom. It looks like this and has a lot of the same features, but you send a link, you set up a time, and they click that link. So that's strictly what I've been using primarily for field trips.
Yeah. And the question, for those of you that are calling in, the question was if the hosting through Zoom webinars in going through Google Meets gets around school bans on Zoom, because apparently there are some schools that actually ban that platform. I think that now, post COVID-19, we're going to see a lot more freedom to use Zoom and fewer bans, because it's so prevalent right now. And also, I think that now that we're all getting used to using it, when it goes away from being free for over 40 people or 40 minutes, we're all going to be missing it, and probably a lot of subscriptions in the future. Now, somebody asked about using docents or volunteers for your virtual field trips. Have you been thinking about that, or you've been focusing just on staff? Or do you plan to integrate them in the future to sort of include them in your content?
Well, I hope so, because I have been focusing just on staff, so it's just been me. But I think that we probably need to get through the stay-at-home order for North Carolina, which might be coming soon, so that I could actually have docents or volunteers see what goes on in person, I think, which sounds kind of funny to see in person what happens, but I want them to see the setup and everything. And then I hope in the fall to have an intern that will hopefully be able to do this as well, because I was once an intern doing virtual field trips. So it has helped me, and I hope that to at least get 1 or 2 people that would feel comfortable with it. I'm sure some of my volunteers would not want to touch this at all, but I think I have a couple that would feel comfortable, especially interns, because they have been using, a lot of college students have been using this technology already.
Mm-hmm.
And likewise, I had hoped to, and I still hope to recruit docents. And I have a few that we've had conversations about it, but not yet. There's very few museum programs that we've chatted to that are completely run through their volunteer systems. I think the Smithsonian still has a virtual field trip program run by their volunteers, but let's see, I can't remember which Smithsonian that is, but for us, it was more about the technology, because we have that cart, that the person that goes out there in the galleries needs to be able to problem solve that. And if one of the museum educators has to be there doing that for them anyway, they might as well be doing the virtual field trip. So we have been doing, since the Monday that we were first telecommuting, we have been doing all of our docent training through the webinar feature. That was a super quick prototype to turn the very first speaker in 3 days notice to a webinar host. So now all of our docents are highly trained to be able to at least participate in a webinar, and that's gone well. So maybe next year we can start to train more of them to fit the demand that we're having.
And a lot of people want to know about scheduling. Just how are you going about scheduling and getting that process down? Is it online? Are they calling in? How are they going about that?
We use something called Calendly, so that Chelsea puts I have something in Doodle. Doodle also allows you to connect your calendar. So Doodle or Calendly or something where you can say, these are the slots that I'm available to be able to chat. And they can go ahead and schedule their AV check and their actual virtual field trip all at the same time. In fact, honestly, since COVID-19, we've definitely been pulling back on the AV check. Usually we require the AV check before the actual virtual field trip. Now, sometimes they just join in a little bit beforehand. Mandy, how do you schedule?
Strictly just through email and phone right now. I know at the other site I worked at, CILC, I think it did at the time have a scheduling component back when I used it. So there are definitely ways to, like yours sounds great if I continue to do this. So I won't have to just be emailing teachers back and forth. But if you're just planning on doing this for a short time or for a few schools, just ask them what time works for them and see if it works with your schedule. Right now, I'm pretty open since we don't have visitors here. So I would pretty able to accommodate whenever they wanted.
Mm-hmm. And are you capping the number of people that can participate at one time in terms of, what do you think is a good number? When does it start to get overwhelming, or does it start to get overwhelming on a digital platform?
Well, so I have just been saying one class. So no, I think the most I had was 35, which they must have invited another class because we don't have class sizes that big in elementary school.
Mm-hmm.
I have had a couple of teachers that have split up their class and done one in the morning and one in the afternoon just to allow for more interactive components. But especially when they're just using the chat box, I haven't run into yet any too many people. And I've even thinking of reaching out to teachers. I know a few teachers that are in schools that have less number of students using the virtual components. And I said, if you want to do just a grade level, because it would still only be 20 to 30 kids, you can put that out there as well.
Same thing. I was going to say, for us, that's why the webinar feature was useful for us, is not to manage so many screens and mics and all of the things that can go wrong. We have a little bit more control. So I think the most that I've done so far was 65 at one time. And that the chat was fairly easy to manage because I have certain parts, it's like gallery teaching. There's certain parts of my program where I am asking for responses, and then I'm just sort of scanning very quickly the responses and pulling out a couple so they feel acknowledged. But it's not been overwhelming at all. So
yeah, and I see that one about virtual training. Let me ask a couple more. On the end point of the virtual field trip, are you doing anything after the virtual field trip is over? Are you doing any kind of surveys, follow-up worksheets, follow-up emails to gather any kind of evaluation content or any kind of data that's helping you build future programs?
That's a good idea, but I have not been doing it.
Data right now. So
yeah, a lot of teachers have been emailing me afterwards, thanking me, which I thought was kind of cool because they don't usually email me after an in-person field trip, which I thought was different. So I've been just compiling their comments into a Word document just so I can share it with our board, just to show that I have been doing something during this time.
I'm so distracted by the chat. I'm sorry, I'm in the chat window, so I forgot what the purple question was. What?
Inside of the field trip, are you following up afterwards with surveys, evaluations, collecting any kind of data that you're using for future development or to get funding?
Yes.
Yeah.
So to make a long story short, that process has evolved a lot. In the beginning, we spent a lot of time developing a lesson plan they do beforehand, a lesson plan they can do afterwards, and this lengthy survey that most of the teachers didn't have time to do. So we have streamlined that just even before COVID-19 to something super, super easy. They don't have, for our museum folks, you might know there's a gallery strategy, nouns and adjectives, or I wonder, we use those two strategies a lot in our virtual field trips. So we will either collect nouns about an artwork in advance or questions, so that way it's just a real simple list the teacher can type up and send. For evaluation, so like I said, really the teachers don't want the post-visit resources. If anything, they want a link to something you already have to learn more. They don't want a full lesson plan. And the evaluation needs to be something they can do in 2 minutes or less.
And somebody just asked, are either of you concerned that you're going to have a decrease in your programs, you know, and the number of people that want to do virtual programs once all of this is over? Or, I mean, do you still see it as a good thing to continue on and have as an option? I mean, how do you feel about that?
Mandy, I'll let you go first.
Well, I think definitely this upcoming school year, it wouldn't surprise me if we have less in-person trips, not just because they don't want to, but because they might not be able to. At least in North Carolina, or at least in our county, field trips were the first thing to go before they closed the schools. So I think continuing this as an option would be helpful. I think people will still want to come if they're able to. And I still hear people saying, oh, I wish I could come, but this is a good alternative. And I think it can help us or our site reach out to even more students, because even though our field trips are free, bus cost is still prohibitive to some schools. So I think this could increase our reach out into the community. So I think, yes, at first it might decrease in-person trips, but not because just because they can't, but at least they'll have this option. Oh, wow.
That was actually one of the myths that Tom and Al and I addressed in the fall conference presentation, is that we have not seen any decrease. In fact, we actually see an increase in attendance because of the virtual field trips. Like I said, in the fall Frida Diego exhibition, a lot of the teachers were using this as a pre or post visit experience for their actual school visit to the museum. So I don't see any of that. But yes, we have had some no-shows. I find that anyone that is experiencing our programs from the first time, we have to work with them just a little bit more than teachers that might already have been in a workshop and then they decide to do the student program. While I'm at it, super quickly addressing one of the questions about equity, because digital equity is a huge problem right now during all of this. And we're excited to work with Statesville Library for, they're doing packets. We've created a book list together, and we're going to create some virtual programs, and then we are sending them some materials that they're going to pass out to people in packets. So they're one of the few libraries that's open now for students that need to come in and experience the internet. And while the students come in and do their schoolwork, they'll also have all of these resources that can go with it. So, but I think addressing equity in what we do is a responsibility of our field, definitely.
Yeah, and to touch on that also, a few weeks ago, we did have Alexander Brooks, and he's on here somewhere. I don't see him. Oh, he's at the bottom.
Oh, he's right beside you on mine.
and he did touch about a program that he developed where he was passing out kits with activities with free meals and free lunches. And I know that particularly in my county, in the Panhandle, on any given day in my county, you can find at least 3 feeding sites that feed everybody from children, small children, to seniors. And so these food distribution programs are still going strong, and it's a great place to put your content or put materials to be given out to people that don't have internet access. And so that's also something to think about.
Yeah, and I did something similar. I have coloring books with scenes from the farm, and also little activity packs that I actually just took from our teacher packet that we send to teachers prior to in-person field trips with activities. And I actually have a box on the porch of our visitor center, and I will look out and see people picking them up. I put packs of crayons in there, and I also emailed it to teachers that scheduled virtual field trips, that they could give it to the students that didn't have that capability in their packet when they pick it up from the school.
So it's something to really keep in mind. And also, like Michelle talked on, a lot of public libraries are reopening. And so that's a great place also to distribute materials that are non-electronic, and trying to get some of these out there. And also keep in mind, because this is a personal problem for my family, but a lot of these programs are not friendly to people with disabilities. And so, start thinking about different ways to include them into that content. Because I know I have a disabled child right now, and I'm just have written off the last 9 weeks of school because there's no way that he understands an online program. And so when we think about inclusion and equity, we need to remind ourselves that there's a whole range of learning styles and abilities out there that we need to start teaching towards when we do programs. We're coming up to we're 5 minutes over. I'm not sure if Zinni is there.
Here.
So,
all right. I don't know that we've ever ended these at an hour, but
we've done it.
You know what? Just to add in my perspective of this, as somebody who's spent the last 20 years in sort of the collections, exhibitions, and operations corners of museum work, it's been really terrific to sit in on all of these different meetups and really learn about the educators, about the volunteers, the docent training. It's inspirational what everybody's doing. The pivot has been extreme and pretty sharp, and I'm just proud of everybody. I've really enjoyed just learning, sitting here sort of observing, and then the chats are great too, just the relevant questions. So thank you, really, Michelle, Mandy, both Michelles, great speakers, good great presentations, chats. Don't worry, Michelle, I'm gonna give you a minute.
Okay.
I'm just gonna do my final spiel. If you, the other Zoom meetups this week, if you work in collections at all, that group is meeting tomorrow at 1 o'clock Eastern. If you are a director or you wear many hats, administration is in your purview. It's a tough place to be right now, but the directors are meeting, SEMC directors, on Friday morning at 10 a.m. Again, that's Eastern. And then, as always, we have our SEMC happy hour at 5 o'clock. Those links, I'll send them out again tomorrow in the e-news. If you're not getting that, shoot me an email. We'll figure that out. Michelle has been really good about forwarding things to the registration list. A lot of it is on Facebook. I can't keep up with all of our social media channels right now. We're without a communications manager, so I hope to rectify that soon. But anyway, just thank you all, and Michelle, back to you.
Yeah, I'm going to take a lot of the content that we went over and some of the links that people have been posting in the chat, and then I'll transcribe it to that Google Doc. So again, check back to that Google Doc. It says I update it once a week. I really update it whenever I find cool information to add to it. And look at the very end to the resource list, because that's where most of the links for things that's where I've been placing it. And there's one particular link on there, and it's a spreadsheet that's being compiled by a young lady named Michelle Moon, and it's fascinated me all day. It's a spreadsheet of museums across the country and the number of layoffs and furloughs that they've had. And so I think this is good information for all of us to be aware of, that right now through the museum community, there's a lot of people without jobs. And so I think that we need to be a lot more aware of that. And when you start to look at this spreadsheet and you compare the annual operating budgets, because it's museums of all shapes and sizes, and the number of people they're laying off, and then the vast majority of them are in education departments. And so it's something to really think about, especially when educators are being tasked to provide content online, but at the same time, they're some of the first people that have been laid off. So check it out in that resource list, and maybe together collectively we can come up with something that can be done, or at least a voice. But thank you, and please join us next week. Next week, our topic is, I should have remembered this one right off. It's summer camp programs. This one is really in demand, and so we're going to have two young ladies that are going to speak about different ways that they are handling their summer camps. And so that should be a really good one. That is next Tuesday at 3 o'clock Eastern time. And so please join us, and thank you, everybody. And thank you, Michelle and Mandy, again, for joining us today and sharing all of your resources with us.